My name is Tara Viswanathan, and I am the founder and former CEO of Rupa Health. And this is how I screwed up and learned a lot about hiring the right people for the right stage.
Welcome back to How I Screwed This Up, where founders share the biggest mistakes on the road to building a company and the hard-won lessons that follow. I'm Sarah Hallam. I run startup content here at Rippling, and for today's episode, I'm thrilled to welcome Tara Viswanathan, the co-founder and CEO of Rupa Health, to the show. Tara created Rupa in 2018 to solve a problem she was passionate about, bringing functional medicine to the masses. She grew Rupa over the course of 6 years to $80 million in sales ARR and sold the company to Fullscript in 2024. Tara shares today about how ignoring her gut intuition during a critical point in Rupa's journey created ripple effects throughout the business. After this painful lesson, she developed her Calibrating for Greatness framework, an intensive vetting process that transformed her hiring approach. In fact, her process is so thorough that for one VP of engineering position, she consulted the help of 30 different senior engineers to make sure she was calibrated on what greatness looked like in the role. What makes Tara so exceptional is her methodical approach to problem solving. Founders are in for a real treat this episode, and prepare for brutal honesty and practical wisdom to help you guide you through your own hiring process. Let's dive in.
I set out to start Rupa in 2018, which now feels like forever ago and a generation ago in terms of how people think about their health. At that time, people really didn't know about functional medicine or personalized medicine or longevity medicine, kind of the trends that are happening now. And at that time, that was the mission of the company. It was, how do we make what I believed was the future of healthcare, essentially functional and more personalized medicine? How do we make that mainstream using technology? That was the goal of Rupa. And what we ended up scaling was a lab services product where we basically brought in all of the different specialty and advanced labs in one platform for doctors to order for their patients and get all of that data in one place. So I think it's funny because I think in startup land, so many people chop off the true exploration and beginning phase of their company, and they count their launch date as their start date. But in reality, you're probably working on and thinking about this problem for a very long time. And I think for us, 2018 is when I quit my job to actually start exploring the space. And I had no idea what the product was. I just knew that there was this trend happening. There was this massive shift in healthcare, and I had to do it. And I had no idea how I was going to get there. I had no idea if anybody wanted to work on it with me. I just had to go do it. Yeah, so I had actually been a part of and seen a lot of companies raise money too quickly, hire out a big team, and then kind of go bust. And I'd seen the problems of you have too many people and you can't actually iterate and build as fast as you need to hit product market fit. Being able to recruit and retain excellent people is probably the number one most important thing that a CEO ends up doing. And I knew nothing when I came into Rupa. In the beginning, I was very big on non-traditional backgrounds and people who were kind of general hustlers. I tend to really like people who have basically had to go figure out their life on their own terms and have not followed a path. That doesn't mean they didn't go to great schools or work at great companies, but it means like the through line of their life is something that they've initiated versus something that the world has given them a ladder or a structure for. And so those were all of our early hires. And I think over time, investors and really well-meaning people told me, you need to hire more experienced people, nice resumes. And they said that, and I think I fell into that trap a little bit. And I made mistakes by following nice resumes in kind of the middle of building Rupa. It can be scary for first-time founders to have enough confidence to not just go with the obvious looks good on paper recommendation and to take a chance on somebody, because essentially like there is something to hide behind if you hire the person with the great pedigree and you can say, well, like all signs pointed to this person should have been great, but they weren't, versus if you kind of take a chance on somebody who maybe doesn't look like the perfect resume on paper, you're going on a limb for that and your reputation's at stake. I think that is why people tend to go a little bit the safe route at times. It is scary to go with the unconventional pick. Honestly, that wasn't it for me. I can really empathize with that, but that wasn't it for me. I think what it was for me was feeling like maybe I'm just missing something. Maybe I don't know because I haven't seen it yet, and I should trust other people who probably know better. And so what ended up happening was right after we raised our seed round in 2020, one of our investors had like this amazing candidate for a head of ops. And, he was super smart, amazing resume, and we ended up hiring him. But I remember sitting there and thinking, what does a head of operations even do? Like, I don't know how to even grade this person and see if they're going to be successful or not, or tell them what to do, because I don't know what they do, and I don't know what they would do here. And so we ended up bringing this person on, and he's amazing. We're still friends to this day, but it ended up not being the right fit because his skill set was just a little bit later stage. I remember thinking when we were like Series A-ish, oh my gosh, he would be such a great fit right now. Like, we need his skill set right now, but we just didn't need it at the seed. It's not only finding the right person, it's finding the right person for the right stage. And so that was a really hard lesson because it was the first kind of brand name person who we'd brought in after raising our round. And what were we supposed to do? Was it my failure that I couldn't give him the work that would help our company move forward? Was it what was going on here? And so that was a really tough one to learn. I think that my mistakes in hiring were not only the difference in material success criteria in terms of where we could have been. Like, we had incredible growth throughout the history of Rupa. I actually believe that we left growth on the table because of hires we made, and mistakes we had to clean up after they left. And it was a lot of mistakes. Up until through the sale process, I found so many mistakes that we actually had to clean up. And it was entirely a result of my not calibrating to what great looks like. And oftentimes you'll get people who have followed the path, who look great on paper, but you can't really understand. And here's the tricky part, whether the success that they had ended up coming from the company, regardless of whether they had been there or not. Like, the company was on a tear. Like, if you find somebody who was, early at DoorDash, was DoorDash successful because of them? Or were they successful because of DoorDash? And I think, you have to get into it and really assess whether they are the people who are responsible for that growth and that change or not. In the beginning, I went off of gut feel, and that ended up having actually great results. And then as the company grew, I tried to apply more of a process because everybody was telling me that I needed an interview process and I needed, certain criteria and questions and all these things. So I tried applying that, and I made so many mistakes. And I realized something, in the beginning, gut hiring worked because I knew my gut was calibrated to identifying greatness, identifying the needle in the haystack greatness in people. And the core skills that we actually needed in the beginning were just get shit done, be a builder, those core things and how to operate in the beginning. I knew that because I come from startup world. I'm very good at the 0 to 1. That is my world. Then once we got larger and we needed more specialization, we needed scaling in that new phase as we were growing, and we needed some roles, needed some specific roles. And so I couldn't just rely on my gut anymore, but basically I have to train my gut. And so if I've never hired for a specific role before, let's say it was, a VP of engineering. If I've never hired for that level before, maybe I've worked with lots of engineers, but I've never hired a VP of engineering. I need to understand what greatness looks like in that VP of engineering. And so I would spend probably a month, which sounds like such a long time and is extremely painful whenever you have an open role and you need to fill it. I spent a month calibrating and identifying and training my gut. And the goal is so that when I see the candidate who we need to hire, I should know it. And I should be able to articulate why. And it can't just be a gut feeling. I can use gut to guide me, but I can't use my gut to guide the team. So I need to understand why. And so I spent a ton of time almost retraining my gut in every new hire that I made that I'd never done before. And as we scaled, that became every hire because I'd never hired at that level before. This is maybe my controversial hot take on building companies, but I think that to build a successful company, you have to move very quickly. Speed is your core advantage. And speed comes from speed of decision making. You need to make more, better, faster, correct decisions as a proportion of all the decisions that you're making. And to do that, you do not have time to analyze every single decision. You have to get good at gut-based decisions. Decisions made on data alone are not great for founders. I think founders need to be very, very good at going with their gut. But your gut is only reliable once you've had some sort of reps on whatever it is that you're doing. You need to build that intuition. There's this process of how do you build your intuition really quickly so that you can actually trust your gut and make better, faster, more, correct decisions. And that is a process, not just in recruiting, but in life that I've kind of adopted, where it's, I want to be better at X. How do I go build an intuition around this as fast as possible so that I can go operate in that domain? And recruiting is exactly the same thing. Or it's, how do I go build an intuition around it? And so it starts with, let me go talk to as many people who have already done the thing that I'm trying to get somebody to do for us. Obviously, it's never going to map perfectly, but let me go talk to the people in our environment who are considered great at it. And let me just talk to as many people. This is the thing that people don't do, where maybe people will go talk to 3 or 4 people. I ended up talking to probably 30 people for a VP of engineering. And that sounds crazy, but it's not about the number. When do you stop talking to people to understand what great is? When do you have an intuition on what great is? It's when you're not learning anything new from the next conversation. And so the first few conversations, my learning curve is so steep. But I would say if you are walking into we call them calibration calls, but basically if you're walking out of any of these calibration calls and you're feeling like, wow, I learned something significant in that call, you're not done. You're only done when you can finish these people's sentences. Once you have your intuition on it, you need to actually codify that intuition. We have a list of about 50 core competencies that are used across roles. I didn't invent these. These come from a book called Top Grading, which is amazing and everybody should read it. Basically, there's these competencies, everything from, people skills all the way to management skills, all the way to core intelligence. And I'd go through and identify exactly which competencies are most important in every single role that we would set up. And then the competencies are also color-coded based on what are hard to change and what are easy to change. Because you basically, if you're saying that something like detail orientation, which is a skill that is very hard to change, if you're saying, you're hiring for a VP finance and detail orientation is a core competency that you want, and it's rated 5 out of 5 in terms of important to have and needs to be great, and it's a red in terms of it's hard to change, if you find somebody who's a 3, that person's disqualified. Doesn't matter if everything else is really high. It basically gives you a way to codify your intuition after you have these conversations. So the process is calibrate with as many people who have already done the role as possible until you stop that learning curve. Then you actually create what we call a one-pager, which is now, based on what I know, what do we need this person to do, and what does success look like, and what does failure look like? Then you go through these competencies list in an Excel spreadsheet, and you basically say, which are the most important competencies for what I am trying to hire for this specific role? And what questions do I need to ask so that I can get a sense of what this person's competence, where this person is on competencies? And then there's this whole process of once you're ready to interview, you actually rank everybody after every single interview on each competency. And by doing this, when you come out of an interview, you have a gut feel already. You say, I think this person's a yes, or I think this person might be a no, or I'm unsure. And what you're doing with the competencies is you're basically codifying the areas that you feel certain on and the areas that you feel uncertain on, so that you can then share that with your team and explain why you either said yes or no to somebody. People hated it though. People hated it. Communicating expectations around how to actually recruit annoyed everybody because it would slow down the process in their minds. Even I had a recruiter call me, an executive recruiter call me and tell me that no one was going to want to work with me because of the types of questions I was asking candidates. Because I also I get into their background. I ask about their childhood. I think there's such an important through line of a person's life that tells you much more about them. I'm looking to understand the slope and trajectory of your life, not the y-intercept. Like y-intercept doesn't matter to me. It's all about slope. And so I'm trying to understand that. And so I need to start with, how did you grow up? Where did you grow up? Who were you in high school? What were your dreams? All of those things, because that plays into who a person is today and where they're going in the future. And I need that. And I had a recruiter call me and tell me that she's never heard of this. It's absolutely crazy. No serious candidate is going to want to answer these questions, much less talk to me. And what I found out was that when I showed that I really want to understand who a person is and their background, people loved that. People felt seen, people felt heard, people felt like they were showing their full selves. Like it was actually really amazing. You're just connecting in a human way. I got a ton of pushback on my entire process, internally too. So when we did the one-pagers, I would have people redo the one-pager. I think there was somebody who had to redo theirs 27 times. I know that sounds crazy, but it was about the learning experience of stop using jargon and start learning how to explain what you do in clear language. In my experience, the process that I mapped out actually speeds things up because you get to higher accuracy, you get to higher correctness, and you get to communication around why you made that decision in a much clearer way. And so you spend less time kind of convincing everybody that this is the person you want to hire or not hire. So for example, whenever we hired our head of engineering, which is the first time that I actually did this kind of process end to end, even our investors were frustrated with me because they said, what are you doing? Just hire a recruiting firm, start talking to candidates. And so I did all of this prep work. And then by the time I was done, very short, to the point where our executive recruiter who helped us with this said that this was the fastest she'd ever seen. Because the second half of this, actually finding, vetting, bringing the candidate on, convincing them that this is the right fit, everything, because the one-pager is actually a sales tool as well. When candidates can see what they're responsible for, what success looks like, what failure looks like in a very crisp and clean way, they feel more bought into the process. For me personally, the biggest learning curve that I went on through Rupa was initially feeling like I was a good judge of character and could hire well, because so many of our early team members were with us through the entire period and they were exceptional and ended up taking up leadership roles, to feeling like I have no idea how to do this and I'm failing the company because I'm bringing in people who are making bad decisions and, you know, everyone's feeling the pain and people aren't getting along and people aren't working, all the way to at the end being like, okay, I think I got this. And, you know, there's so many things I would have done differently in the middle. There's always so many things that you would have done differently. And I think that for me, it was always a really fun problem to solve. Regardless of, it was very challenging times. The people stuff is what was most difficult for me. And naturally, like hiring is all about the people issues. You end up with people unhappy regardless of what you do. And it's very difficult, I think, to learn how to manage that, especially if you're a close-knit team. But for me, I found it so fun. I love solving problems and puzzles like this. And I think especially really understanding human behavior and, you know, human incentives and things like that. And how do you identify greatness? Like, those are things I just love doing. And so the process itself was fun for me, even if it was extremely demanding and difficult and going on a crazy emotional roller coaster through the entirety of it.